Hello, this is Kirsten McDade from Resources, and in this video, I'm going to ask Brian Gouran, the Department of Environmental and Planning Services at the Port of Bellingham, about the interim actions that have already been performed at the Harris Avenue Shipyard cleanup site. Before we get into the specifics, though, Brian, could you tell us what your role is in MATCA cleanup sites?
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. Yeah, my main role in this project is to manage the implementation of the cleanup on behalf of the port as the property owner. So I work closely with our port team to make sure that our organizational goals are considered as we work with ecology and all of our other project partners on the cleanup decisions. And with these types of projects, there's a bunch of different moving parts, including land use goals, tenant operations, project budgets, community interests, and then of course the regulatory requirements. So my main role is to manage and coordinate all of those different issues while implementing the cleanup actions with ecology.
Great. So an interim action is a cleanup action taken on a MATCA site before the official cleanup action plan has been developed. But not all cleanup sites have interim actions. How was it determined that an interim action was needed for this site?
Yeah, and back in 2014, the port and ecology had already completed a significant amount of work on the site investigation feasibility study work. But then as part of the port's regular inspection process of our infrastructure, it was discovered that large portions of some older wooden structures were actually failing. And this condition posed a safety concern for workers in the area, but it also provided us with an opportunity to complete an early cleanup action that actually facilitated full removal of contaminated sediment. So we worked closely with ecology to determine that an interim action would be the best approach for addressing these conditions while also allowing us to get some early cleanup work done.
Great. I'm glad you mentioned the work done on some of the structures on the site, as this is the most obvious work that was done, and folks actually maybe remember that. So can you talk more about what structures have been removed and or repaired from the site?
Yeah, as part of the interim action, a large overwater structure called the Carpenter Building was removed, as well as an associated wooden pier that was connected to the building. After we removed those structures, over 500 creosote-treated piling that supported those structures were also removed. Portions of the wooden pier were replaced so that we could continue to have an operational shipyard, but concrete and steel materials were used, which are much better for the environment. The Carpenter Building itself was not replaced, and so at the end of the project, over 10,000 square feet of previously existing overwater coverage was removed.
From an ecological perspective, what is the benefit of removing overwater structures like the Carpenter's Building?
Overwater structures like the Carpenter Building block sunlight and shade out the shallow nearshore environment that are primary habitat for a variety of species, including eelgrass and juvenile salmon. So by removing and replacing these structures with a smaller footprint, we opened up a large area that was previously shaded out. So additionally to these older structures were supported by creosote-treated timbers, which we mentioned earlier, and the removal of those piles actually improved the water quality and the sediment throughout the area.
Thanks for that information. And now, as I understand it, site investigations have determined that the upland soils are contaminated with copper, zinc, arsenic, and petroleum. What work was done during the interim action to address this soil contamination, and how was it disposed of?
The interim action removed over 1,200 cubic yards of contaminated soil, which were excavated and disposed of at an offsite landfill. The soil contamination of the site is primarily associated with historical industrial shipyard activities like sandblasting and grinding. So it's mostly limited to the shallow soils. The excavation was limited to about 2 to 8 feet below the ground surface to remove the contamination, and then the excavations were backfilled with clean structural sand and gravel.
Now, work was also done in the water to remove contamination. Can you describe what was done in regards to marine sediment and intertidal areas?
Yeah, in addition to the removal of the overwater structures, the interim action included dredging and excavating over 9,000 cubic yards of contaminated sediment from the subtidal areas as well as the shoreline areas. The sediment that was excavated and dredged was placed into a watertight barge, which was then transported to Seattle for transfer to rail cars, which took it to a permitted landfill. The dredged areas were sampled then to confirm that the contamination was successfully removed, and the shoreline excavations were backfilled and capped with an engineered shoreline that included sand and gravel, armor rock, and then that was topped with a finer grained sand and round gravel that supports fish habitat.
So the interim action was completed in 2018, and plans for the remaining cleanup is in the works. What do you envision for the site once it has all been cleaned up?
Well, this property is really an important part of Bellingham's working waterfront, and the port continues to look for marine trades companies that are interested in utilizing that for a variety of different uses, including continued shipyard operations. The cleanup will allow us to put the property back into productive use and then continue to grow that important marine trades industry in our community.
Well, thank you, Brian, for taking the time to explain how the Harris Avenue Shipyard is getting cleaned up from years of industrial contamination. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to say thanks to all of our project partners like the Department of Ecology and Resources and the community in general. We really do look forward to continuing to move these projects forward. They improve the environmental conditions and then support the local economy through cleanup and redevelopment. So we're just looking forward to continuing to work on these and get these projects done.
We are too. Thanks. And thank you again for joining us on this tour, Brian. Eleanor will next talk with the Department of Ecology Site Manager, John Gunther. So be sure to tune in for more information in Stop 4.